Hello and welcome back. Today I'm doing something a little different. I got something from Brittney. It's probably Brittney Karbowski. Oh yes. Makoto Misaka. Churabi la Makoto Misaka. The fact is, she and I have been lab rats for society against our will. Although my style is not in the way you think. It's true. I would explain. You know what? Actually, I think I am going to explain it a bit. The fact is, nobody should have to be society's lab rat. Now, anyone who follows Brittney Karbowski and my favorite big sis Makoto Misaka, the railgun of Tokyo died, knows that the entire Academy City is basically treating the third ranked level 5 or 5 of Academy City as nothing more than data. It's lab rats. Terracina, Gensei, the whole the Kiara family. They just view them as a lab rat. And the fact is, yes, I was once a lab rat for society myself. Now, unlike, say, the likes of Abri or Makoto Misaka's clones, you also see here you got I guess that would actually be 109 something or other. That's the one she meant in Russia. These are all from Russia. There's Railgun. There's the little lolly Misaka 20001, aka Last Order, and then Misaka Worst. They're all clones of Makoto. But I was a little different. I was a lab rat in a different way. My scenario starts in 2001, and more specifically because of my particular age, being born on May 16th, 1988, making me a Taurian dragon. With that, I was supposed to graduate in 2006. We'll get to that aspect in a minute. But because of the fact I'm aimed to be the class of 2006, we have robber barons and politicians basically making me their guinea pigs, which is what I call it then. Today I call it a lab rat, thanks to Mikoto. What happened? In 2001, under the Bush administration, was signed the No Child Left Behind Act. Now, that was ultimately overshadowed with what happened a couple months later, which I can absolutely talk about, and I absolutely remember that day. But because of the No Child Left Behind Act, you now have a trickle-down scenario where, because the government says the fact that no child left behind, the state of Connecticut then has to step in. Now, in all states, you have these scenarios where you have a standardized test that you have to take in order to graduate. In New York, you have your regions. California has their equivalent. In the state of Connecticut, we have what is known as the CAPT test. Connecticut Academic Performance Test, I believe is what the acronym stands for. Now, historically, however, you just simply had to take the test in order to graduate. But because of the No Child Left Behind Act, things changed, and you had to then pass it. but that started with the supposed class of 2006. Now this is taken during your sophomore year, so I was the first class that had to pass this test. And with that, this South Windsor High School had to make a bunch of changes to have it. If you can't do it in the standardized test aspect, you had to do some other things as well. And I did end up not passing two of the tests. But in the meantime, you have this thing called the College Board wanting to upgrade their SAT test, which that of course the CAP test is the one you need to graduate high school. The SAT is more for admissions into college. And now they're trying to make a whole new test. They're doing away some of the aspect of the verbal and making it I can't remember what it's called. But they're also adding on a writing scenario. Now the new verbal was comparable to the old one, but the writing aspect, no one had any comparison to. So out of these, and instead of having them, you now have an entire different aspect of the test. And with that, I basically now have to have a scenario where no one can compare me to, and I'm now the guinea pig. So this whole junior and this of course obviously is taking place in junior year. Now during junior year, in relationship with the CAP test, South Windsor made it so that social studies, they had to take civics their junior year. Historically speaking, you could take it junior or senior year. For us, we now have to take it our junior year. And unfortunately, there was a bunch of things that happened because they would have a scenario where you do an aspect in class. And yet, nonetheless, I did all the stuff I did in civics first semester in psychology, and yet the teacher didn't do anything and submit it to the local head, which could have then sent it to the chain of commands. Again, in hindsight, that's what you should have done, but this is just what you get when you have this first batch. Your guinea pigs, your lab rats. And again, I'm now also a lab rat for the College Board, again, who are just robber barons at this point. This non-profit organization, which I call bullshit on back when I was going through the scenario. It was just total friggin' nonsense. When I was in that scenario, I knew something was amiss. And if for nothing else, it's collegeboard.com, not collegeboard.org. In hindsight, what I should have done with that is, well, either A, take it in the fall of 2005, which would have still been the old test, but that may have had some drawbacks as well, or just do away with the SAT and take the ACT, which has two advantages. First of all, with the SAT, science is an SAT2 aspect, which again, whereas the ACT, it's built in. And the other scenario, the writing is optional. Yeah, both me and my resource teacher said, yeah, we're gonna that all that. And when I got it back, I was in like the 96th percentile with the science, and I got a 24 on the composite, which whereas in comparison to the 1200 full SAT and less than 1,000 just using the old aspect with the SAT, is just unbelievably different. I could probably get, there's, bottom line is with a 24, you really can get in any college I would want to go to. And again, should underline and italicized want to go to. I'd have a fair shot at getting in. The only, I mean, of course I'm not going to go to Duke or Yale or anything like that, but I wouldn't really want to go there either. Again, so, but this whole time I'm this lab rat for these other aspects, and then furthermore, my parents want me to do what is known as a 21-year program, and with that, first of all, I can't technically speaking graduate, even though I'm finished high school. I can't get the diploma, and I haven't technically speaking graduated, which is strike one to begin with. It's a major. Probably, mom, in hindsight, that she probably should have looked elsewhere, because that's just gonna screw with the kid. Bottom line, that's a terrible, terrible idea, because that you have to think of the mind of a 17-year-old. When you've worked so hard, and now you can't legally get what you deserve, despite the fact you have finished it. It wasn't like I got set. It wasn't like I did anything wrong. It's the fact that in order to have additional support from the town, I couldn't legally graduate, and it drove me friggin' nuts. But furthermore, I would have been the first person in this situation, a guinea pig for the town's lab rat. 3 times in 3 years, effectively, I'm being the lab rat for society. I did ultimately get through that aspect, but it was one long ass scenario. And ultimately, just last year, I was able to graduate, college, I should say, through a lot of trials and tribulations. But obviously, we now know about the whole, after these, since 2006, things come and go. Going back to Scouts, do a bunch of this, that, and whatnot. Going back to school, take courses, and graduate. But then, of course, comes the COVID scenario. Now, I do trust vaccines. I did know I have no problem. I try to be responsible. We often hear about blacks and other minorities fearful, not very trustworthy. And the reason has to go with goes back to a cultural scenario where oftentimes they were forced to be society's lab rats because these rich white folks don't want it. They won't want to put it. They want the lab rats to be put on the people at that time they don't care about. The Tuskegee syphilis scenario, it's just total. But they now know the horrors of being society's lab rats, and I can relate to them because of that. In their perspective. However, I wanted to be somewhat responsible, and again, because I knew vaccines worked in general. And trust me, they do not cause autism. I could just go, it just drives me crazy. And the truth behind that is just freaking, just an abhorrent miscarriage of medical science. I really want to find that guy and put the freaking screws to him. I digress. But during this whole time of a potential vaccine, although I want to be a bit responsible and help society, the whole time that of being society's lab rat from 16 to 18, effectively, nearly 15 years earlier, almost 15 years earlier, was in the back of my mind, and because of the fact I live in elderly and disabled housing, I was somewhat required to be one of the first people to get the vaccine, because again, Although I probably don't need it. I live in a scenario where we have all these little old ladies who they get sick just once, they're done. So CVS brought a on-site clinic to the apartment complex, and they vaccinated everyone as quickly as possible. And again, I wanted to be a bit responsible, but after the second vaccine, that whole scenario is something I do have silent regrets about, because the next day, the effects just simply reminded me of what happened 15 years earlier. That's all it did. Fortunately, in fact, I swear to God, I will never, ever, ever be society's lab rat again if I don't have to. Just not gonna do it anymore. I'm done. But hopefully this can be a lesson for politicians and the likes in general, to realize what you do when you make people be the guinea pigs, be the lab rats without their consent. It's just not a good idea.